Let me guess, in the last month, you've seen at least 4 wellness influencers post on their story that you should just be yourself. The best thing that you can be is yourself. And maybe you thought to yourself, really? Myself? Because often I'm pretty self-conscious, I lack confidence, I'm anxious, and often very stressed. And you're telling me the best that I can be is that? Thanks for the advice. See, in this video today, I'm going to explain why being yourself is both the best and worst piece of advice. And to really investigate this, first and foremost, we have to figure out what the hell are we talking about when we talk about the self, because we need to know exactly what this advice is advising us to do. And that's really dependent on what we, or you, assume the self is. Because like you've potentially and probably pointed out in your own head, being yourself is often a part of your problems in life. See, the thing is, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Oscar Wilde. Let's look to the philosophers who since time immemorial have looked up at the sky, gazed upon the cosmos, furrowed their brow while earnestly and intently thinking.
I don't know what any of this shit is and I'm scared.
Okay, let's roll it back to ancient Athens where we have Socrates, this amazing street philosopher who doesn't write anything down, he just says everything orally, he's asking questions, he's investigating truth, quoted in saying, "Know thyself." He's also been quoted as saying the seemingly contradictory statements, "The only true freedom comes from knowledge, and the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." It sounds like a paradox, but here's the deal. Socrates isn't really playing 3D chess, he's on the fourth dimensional level. By inviting his own ignorance, he's asking us and you to dig deeper. Don't assume that you know. Question everything that we take for granted about ourselves, from our identity, how we think, what knowledge is, how something can even be known. He's really saying, you think you know yourself, think again. He is the master mental investigator, challenging us to examine our beliefs, our values, our thoughts, the very essence of who we think we are. Fast forward to the 19th century and we have one of my favorite philosophers, the man with a brilliant mustache who once declared, "God is dead," Friedrich Nietzsche, who shook the foundations of traditional morality that often pinned us as slaves, sinful little humans. But no, he said, no, we are Übermensch, we have a master morality, we can carve our own path, create our own self. He's not here to play nice, he's here to smash your tiny little illusions, those that keep you small. He's here to ask you to call upon your greatness, embracing the chaos and complexities of life and your existence, to rise above the mass and the sheep herd mentality, to become the Übermensch, the Superman who transcends society's traditional values and frameworks of being. Nietzsche's whole message is don't be a follower, be a creator, carve your own path, challenge the status quo, be who you are meant to be, not who anyone else tells you to be. Despite Socrates and Nietzsche forging their own paths in very different millennia and in their own style, they're both fundamentally handing us very similar wisdom. That the journey to just be yourself isn't always simple, it's not clear. It's really a hard, soul-searching expedition that demands a lot of us. It demands that we question, challenge, and often just reject the outright narratives that are fed to us. Socrates nudges us towards self-inquiry, while Nietzsche wants us to grab life by the horns and redefine our own values on our terms. And look, what's clear is this within most of the philosophical literature. Being yourself isn't as simple as having the assumption of who you think you are in this moment lead you. It's often about challenging the idea of who you are, writing your own script, becoming the creator, even if it means crossing out what you once thought was non-negotiable. So when you hear that piece of advice, just be yourself. It's not really just about embracing your quirks and flaws as they are here today and calling it a day. That's me. It's about confronting the chaos, confronting the contradictions, your own ineptitudes, your inadequacy, and then challenging yourself to forge something new of your own volition. Recognizing you're not beholden to some meager version of yourself that you or someone else has handed down to you. This isn't just philosophical gymnastics, it's really an invitation to level up your entire life, your consciousness. Letting go of the basic assumptions of the three-dimensional space and instead really looking at things through a more complex lens, recognizing that nothing is really separate, everything is interconnected, and this complex nature of the dark, the light, are all working together, within us and outside of us. But let's not steer too far into the clouds. Let's kind of ground this in the psychological pragmatic frameworks, or slightly more pragmatic. Okay, first on the menu, we have the idea of the self concept. In the psychological literature, this just refers to the idea or the image that you hold of yourself. Picture it as a mental scrapbook of who you think you are, filled with attributes, memories, roles, characteristics, beliefs, your abilities, your values, your goals. It's your personal exhibit, constantly being updated with life's ongoing experiences. But here's the thing, while the self-concept does give you a sense of identity, it's also like looking through a kaleidoscope. The image is constantly shifting, it's never still, and it's colored by your perceptions. But the clear limitation is that this self-image is limited by, well, your self-awareness. And, well, God knows that most of us remain strangers even to ourselves. Consistently wondering, why did I do that? Oh, why did I say that? Oh my God, how did I get myself into this? Another psychological idea is social identity theory. This theory suggests that your sense of self is kind of like a club membership, right? It's dependent on how many groups or clubs you pertain to. For instance, myself, I pertain to the Colombian club because I'm from Colombia and I was born there. But I'm also part of the Canadian club because this is the country I immigrated. And I'm also part of the male club because I got, well, you get the drift. It's all about how we classify into the social world and kind of through comparison and categorization where we fit into the mix. Here's the thing. This theory tends to pull all of our senses of identity into the external basket, right? And it kind of leaves that internal gooey stuff outside of it. And that stuff often does define a big portion of our lives. The stuff that can't be measured through a categorical lens. Then we have the concept of narrative identity. This idea suggests that we're all kind of walking, talking autobiographies, weaving together the tales of our past, our present, and our imagined future to kind of construct this narrative or idea of our lives. This story says this is me. The story is me. But, and it's a big but, there's one golden nugget that I've learned in my cognitive science studies. It's the fact that your perception of your life, your memories, are extremely fallible. Your perceptions and cognitive distortions are high, and the likelihood that you have some like sole objective indication of your own story is, quite frankly, like impossible. Near impossible. In essence, while these theories provide interesting lens of understanding how we shape up the social world, they also kind of remind us that understanding ourselves is less of a science and more of an art. A delicate dance of external influences and internal narratives, all filtered through a brain that, well, loves to play tricks on us. The philosophers ask us to know ourselves, to investigate. The psychologists provide us some useful frameworks for understanding parts of ourselves. But even these frameworks are very limited, stemming from the fact that they are cognitively distorted by our own perceptual biases and limited by your own awareness as to where it stands. So can we ever really understand the self? Maybe we're just doomed to never be ourself or understand what that means. Again, this depends. If we are contained and attached to the idea that the self is wholly defined by our identity markers, social characteristics, and the years that we've been on this earth, well then, yeah, perhaps the psychological frameworks might be our best bet. But if you, like me, which my guess is I'm correct here, give some credence to the spiritual aspect of life, then the concept of self broadens, it expands, and gives us something far more powerful not to hold on to. So if we dive deep into the spiritual realm, let's think a lot of this New Age philosophy blended with a lot of Eastern spiritual philosophy, we have a very different understanding of the self. Picture this. On one level, you've got your ego. Let's call that the thing that the psychologists concern themselves with. The idea of who you think you are. Social categories that you may belong to, your gender, all of these things belong to the ego. The ego can look at these things and go, yes, this is what makes me separate from others. Your achievement, your race, political ideology, religious affiliation. It's kind of the surface level. The ego wants to be separate. It's all about boosting your sense of separateness, pushing you to outdo everyone else, generally making you feel kind of miserable and discontent. It's the voice in your head that never shuts up, the one that a lot of us, and maybe a lot of you, might still be convinced is you. But, very simple exercise to prove you wrong. Take a deep breath. Let it go. There wasn't any thought in your brain during that moment, but you didn't cease to exist. Your existence or your sense of self isn't predicated upon that voice talking. That voice is just the ego. Now, flipping the script, on the higher end, we have the higher self, as it's often referred to. This part of yourself doesn't relate to or care about your achievement, status, race, gender, religion. It's what I would call the real you. The deeper part of yourself that is connected to the infinite. It is the crest of the wave upon the infinite ocean of awareness. While it is a crest of a wave, it's also just part of the ocean. This part of you is all about living in harmony, wisdom, peace, joy, contentment. If you're living from this space, that essentially means you've leveled up. You're no longer sweating the small stuff or getting swept up into petty dramas. Instead, you're moving through life with grace, with a deep, intuitive knowing that guides you. It's like being in the flow state, but spiritually. So how does one even jump from, let's say, being ego-driven to enlightenment? Not suggesting that I am. It's a trip, for sure. And really what we're talking is meditation, mindfulness, deep inner work, consistent self-inquiry, not taking yourself for granted. The philosophers have a point. Basically, any and every tool that can help silence that ego's chatter, that voice in your head, and help you cultivate some stillness. In that stillness, the awareness broadens, and your sense of self is revealed. It's really about peeling away the layers of the ego that keep that self hidden. Reaching that point of self-realization, well, that's the jackpot. Suddenly, you're not so worried about, well, most things. You're connected to an infinite love, an awareness that is boundless, unconditionally loving and accepting everything that you are, here and now. Imagine living every day guided by a deep sense of knowing that you are loved, that you are supported, that no matter what happens, everything's going to be okay. In short, when we're talking about the spiritual perspective, it's kind of about recognizing that we do have this dual nature. Part of us, chasing likes on social media, please subscribe and like this video. And part of us just being one with the universe. The real trick is learning how to kind of silence the loudspeaker on your ego and tune into the cosmos' gentle whisper, the universal nudges, the language of the universe. Okay, so I know that was a lot, but what can you take from this when it comes to the idea of being yourself and understanding that piece of advice is either the worst or the best? Where does this fit in? First and foremost, be cautious and critical of everything that you think you are, of everything that your mind supposes that you are. As the philosophers have noted, the self must not be taken for granted, and we are called to be more mindful and discerning in the dance of understanding ourself, questioning ourself and our nature, as it can easily be displaced in the hands of ideologies, other people's pressures, and the social fabric that we live within. And moreover, if we hang ourselves purely to the sense that we are bound to the material realm, then we are confined to experience ourselves as limited, perceptually constrained, and at the mercy and the whims of our perceptual and cognitive distortions. But if we, and you, can accept the idea that the self is not wholly defined by our mind's perception of itself, or the social fabric that we find ourselves intertwined within, then what are we left with? We are left with a self that is unbounded, wholly infinite, that crest of the wave upon the ocean. Yes, you are unique in an individuated aspect of the divine, as the Bhagavad Gita says, but you are still just a reflection of the infinite divine. This is where we may find ourselves. Okay, but what if I don't believe that? What if I just have a hard time believing all that? You know what? I always say you don't have to. You can just have a direct experience of it. And this is accessible. I know, because I've had it. You can have this experience through meditation, breathwork, self-inquiry, developing the awareness and quieting the mind. These are the tools that will give you a direct experience so that you may know yourself as such. Okay, let's say I do it, but then what does that mean to be myself then? What is the self if it's not defined, if I don't have a roadmap of being or what to do? Well, that's the whole thing. Really being yourself is learning to drop all the barriers that allow you to just be present. Any and all barriers that keep you from simply being. When we drop the narratives of who we think we are, when we release ourselves from the negative distortions and limiting beliefs, when we reject our paranoid self-consciousness that does not define us, and instead we embrace the one thing we can be certain of, our attention, and where we place it, and giving our attention just to the moment in front of us, to this moment here and now, being wholly and devotionally present to wherever and whatever we may be doing. This is how we drop the barriers and be ourselves. Our unique yet universal nature shines through. This is when being yourself is the best piece of advice. Yet this journey doesn't isolate us. It connects us more deeply to the tapestry of life. To recognize that we are one with everything is not a lonely journey. It is a self-expansive one. In our quest for self-realization, we discover the interconnectedness of every piece of fabric in this universe. Our true self is not found only in isolation, but within the context of community and connection. See yourself mirrored in the reflection of others. Our individual light contributes to the collective glow. Each of us, whether we see it in this lifetime or the next or the one after that, are clued upon the task of knowing ourself. And every one of us is divine. But we tend to forget that. And to remember, to become a member of the divine once more, we simply have to drop the old stories and learn that we can create new ones if we choose to. In fact, that's the whole point. Life is about choosing. It is a creation. It is both a creation that we can participate in and surrender to. Being yourself is most possible when you drop all ideas of who you think you are or who you think you should be, and you simply shift to living from the heart, from intuition, from your own wisdom, innate values, dispensing with the often disempowering and limiting voices of the mind. For in the end, life is both a masterpiece that we co-create and a mystery that we are invited to surrender to. And then this seemingly paradoxical dance of creation and surrender, that's where we find our true selves. Not as isolated entities, but as integral parts of a wondrous and interconnected whole. So when you hear that advice, be yourself, you might want to ask yourself, what the hell do they even mean, and what self? If I'm limiting myself to the thoughts of who I may think I am, then yeah, you're probably going to suffer. But if you can heed that call to action of self-inquiry, self-examination, to transcend your awareness past the surface level idea of who you think you may be, and allow yourself to find presence, surrender, and being, then that might just be the best piece of advice ever.